actually, never mind about a living wage or a floor wage, I'm not even convinced that a minimum wage is being paid.
The Global Value Chain Research Group enables for the first time multidisciplinary research on globalisation, economy and the workplace. As competition continues to drive consumer prices down on goods like clothing and food, millions of workers are unable to earn a living wage. Experts at Birmingham Business School Global Value Chains Workshop believe current trends make this new approach vital.
There is a strong link between economic upgrading and social upgrading. Actually, this morning we saw that we can also talk about social and economic downgrading. So the debate is very much open. But social upgrading is about making sure that actually people work and earn a salary that is enabling them to actually live with decent living standard.
Our main aim is to actually try and understand the implications of the internationalisation of production and the outsourcing of a lot of economic activity. So in order to be able to have practical implications, we need to understand how it's happening. I think this will have implications for policy, for example. Why is it important for countries to invest in science and technology, to invest in the skills of their workforce?
Research into global value chains continues to show how workers are forced to work longer hours for no extra pay. As the price of rice escalates, they struggle below the poverty line.
As far as the clothing industry is concerned, workers have always been undervalued in terms of the contribution they make. Garments don't exist if they're not made. But if you look at the proportion of the total value that actually goes to a worker, when you look at a single unit of clothing, it's scandalous. Worldwide, it's absolutely scandalous. GVC research, for me, has to really unpack the whole problem of the costing of labour and engage in a debate about how we can find ways of making sure that more money comes down the pipe to workers.
Whilst research typically reveals victimisation of workers who try to state their case and that of others, this doesn't mean progress towards fair deals are stifled.
There's just so many barriers. I mean, workers do protest. They do get together. They unite whether or not they've got an organisation around them, because sometimes the oppression is so great that it can either make you apathetic and feel that there is no point in opposing, or it can galvanise some people, and some remarkable people do come through.
Employers faced with only voluntary codes may not comply, and there's another difficulty: companies outsourcing elsewhere as soon as current suppliers comply and reward workers more. South Asia countries compete for retailers in a competitive race to the bottom, where the lowest cost triumphs.
Fair trade is one thing which can definitely help to make improvements, but on its own, if you say take Ghanaian cocoa producers, Kwapa Cocoa, which is the major fair trade exporter, only exports about 4 or 5% of its total exports go out as fair trade. The majority doesn't. So then you have to think, well, that can play a role, but what other strategies are needed? For example, better prices, fairer terms, more stability of supply, more stability of price, and also making improvements for producers themselves. So how can they be more productive, earn a better income through the work that they do?
These companies are businesses. They're not governments. They're not nation states. They can't enforce even, the sort of minimum labour conditions in some countries. But what the voluntary standards do, I think, is give another platform for a voice for workers and NGOs and civil society to actually make, in terms of retailers being responsible and responsive to the concerns of consumers in northern-based economies. I think what's going to be interesting is how the voice of consumers changes when you see the market shifting to China.
The changing economic landscape is both a challenge and an opportunity for the Global Value Chains Research Group. In his keynote speech, Professor Raphael Kaplinski discussed forces which determine the gains in global value chains.
I'm a little pessimistic. I think there's a substantial reserve army of labour in the world, and I think the pressures on labour, particularly unskilled labour, right through the world are going to increase now that there's going to be a recession, at least in the north and perhaps in the south. And that's an implication not just for workers in developing countries, but for workers in rich countries as well. I think this is a period in which labour is going to have to fight for its rights, because if things are just left to the market, inequity is going to increase.
I think the main thing is it's a very clear recognition that the problems of the wages of the workers are very much international problems, and that if we're not careful, places where people have got reasonably adequate wages will be undercut by people with less adequate wages, which will be in no one's interest. So the question is really, what sort of institutional structures can you devise that would oblige people to pay more, employ better? Oh, I think it's very important. No, I'm really pleased it sprung up in Birmingham, which is the home of manufacturing.
And in another drive towards understanding interaction between businesses, workers and relationships with economic performance, Birmingham Business School launched CREW, the Centre for Research on the Economy and the Workplace, another platform to bring different stakeholders and research disciplines together to feed knowledge into global policies towards economic and social upgrading. Hazel Westwood, Birmingham Business School.